Thank you, Stephanie. And I just want to make sure you saw Alexandra's message in the chat. So, everyone, thank you for coming to today's panel as Stephanie on restaurant workers' rights and policy advocacy. Stephanie and Alexander Sosa, the CEO of Farm Worker and Landscaper Advocacy Project, is one of the moderators also. Our wonderful panel is Regan Draper, the Executive Director of Chicago Hospitality Accountability and Advocacy Database, or CHAD, Richard Rodriguez, the National Policy Director of One Fair Wage, and Joellen Chernow, the co-founder and co-director of Survivors Know. This workshop was organized because there's a need to have conversations within spaces on food systems and food justice. Often the experiences of food workers are overlooked when they are the ones that, bring food to our table. And in this case, the people who bring food to other people's table, restaurant workers. Restaurant workers face suppression, violations, abuse at the hand of abuse of their labor rights at the hands of their employers, politicians, policies. The conversation also with restaurant workers needs to include how policies and government actions impact the communities where the workers come from, whether it be recent or historical. And now I'm going to pass it on to Alexandra Sosa.
Thank you, Rachel. Stephanie, I think you need to take one of me out.
Working on it right now. One second.
Thank you.
Alexandra, what is the account name that is the second one? No me sale uno.
Can you hear me?
Ooh, 1 second, y'all. So sorry for this tech issue.
Can you hear me okay? No?
Not yet. There's an echo. I'm sorry.
All right, can you hear me now?
I can start the Q&A, and then when she's back on, she can continue. So Reagan, Richard, and Joellen, can you introduce yourselves again and talk about yourself, your organization, and what work are you focusing on, and what is your current work? So Reagan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Reagan. My pronouns are they, them. I am one of the co-founders and executive director of the CHAD project. CHAD stands for Chicago Hospitality Accountable Advocacy Database. That's a mouthful, so we just call it CHAD. CHAD is a worker-led grassroots organization that was started in 2020 to advocate for hourly restaurant workers. I come from over 15 years of experience working in Chicago restaurants and bars. And so our work in 2020 was about advocating for the worker, and giving them tools and resources so that they could stand up for abuses. Right now, a lot of our work is the same, advocating for hourly workers, working with them to organize their workplaces. In the past year and a half, we have shifted to helping restaurant spaces wholly, including management and ownerships, prepare for the increased ICE and immigration enforcement in our city. So that's where we've shifted our strategy a little bit to focus on that. What can restaurants do internally to prepare, but always still centering the worker and advocating for the hourly worker and all of that. And I will pass it over to Joe.
Hi everyone. My name is Joe. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm, excuse me, one of the co-founders of Survivors Know, and Director of Worker Justice. Survivors Know is a Midwest-based um, organization dedicated to advancing um, survivor power. And really reimagining a future beyond power-based violence. So we work towards building survivor power through intersectional structural organizing. We really focus on the systems, but meet workers where they're at, place their experiences within the larger context of system failure and policy failure, to really focus on creating conditions where workers can thrive. And our focus really is like tapping into the leadership of those most impacted of survivors. And just for language clarity, we use power-based violence rather than gender-based violence to so that we can better examine how power exploits, moves, abuses, and it sort of opens up more area for us to be able to take a more structural approach towards organizing for change in the industry here in Chicago. And I will pass it on over to Richard.
Hi, everybody. Richard Rodriguez, National Policy Director for One Fair Wage. We're a national advocacy organization fighting for 13.6 million restaurant workers nationwide, including 300,000 restaurant workers and members and over 2,500 high road restaurant employers. While focusing on advocacy for restaurant workers, we also advocate for raises for all tipped workers, working to make sub-minimum wages and low-wage service workers' jobs meaningful. Some of our work includes organizing. So we have active organizing campaigns in several states across the country, working on disrupting the national narrative with the National Restaurant Association, our enemy. We mobilize voters. So we have an active campaign right now in Michigan where we're mobilizing petition work, looking to raise wages for workers in Michigan. We fight for policy solutions. Here in Illinois, we're moving the One Fair Wage bill in Springfield. We recently passed the One Fair Wage ordinance in Chicago, where hopefully I can share a little bit more where we're defending the One Fair Wage ordinance recently coming up. We're also moving legislation in Washington, D.C., fighting for a living wage for all bill, where we'll be introducing a $25 minimum wage federally here in the next few weeks. And we provide services to our members. Some of the services that we provide is legal aid, applying for a relief fund, a job board, workforce training, leadership training, and advocacy, and building community. Recently, we just also launched Just Safe Food, which we'll cover a little bit more here as well, to take on the National Restaurant Association and their evil Just Safe Food. And who's next? Who should I pitch it over to?
I was just wondering if Alexandra was able to get into the room.
We have not been able to get her back in the room. Apologies for that, y'all. We're working to get her back.
Okay, thank you. And so you were everyone was talking about their current work on, so the work that you're doing, how does it intersect, or how, what, or if I want to get in depth with your work dealing with, ICE or wage reform, or intersecting with what like was considered like recent events, which have lasted for a long time, and that they're not recent. So if you want to start, Reagan.
Yeah, I think what I heard in your question was what is impacting workers, both maybe nationally and locally, but then also maybe like the intersection of current realities and how things like immigration also cross over with wages. I think a reason why I advocate in this industry and why I think a lot of us here advocate in this industry is workers are not protected across the food system. We also see it with farm workers, but especially in restaurants, all kinds of abuses happen from wage, sexual harassment, discrimination, and there are few protections for workers there. And so when we have a heightening of federal enforcement in an industry that already has so few protections in place, we see that workers are really spread thin. They're they're handling the cost of living crisis, not being able to pay their bills, while also being terrorized, not only in their workplaces, but in their community. So our work has really shifted to try to address this like urgent crises that a lot of workers are in. Um, really appreciate the work that like One Fair Wage has done to abolish the tipped wage in Chicago, but also nationally. The tipped wage is a site of a lot of imbalance and corruption. It is the root cause of a lot of sexual harassment and discrimination that we see in the industry. So really looking at all of these issues is intersectional, and I think it's important for us to see how they all like impact one another. But happy to pass it to Joe or Richard if you have more to add on there.
And if you want to add like your current, like what actions have you like, or work you're currently, or if it can be specific with, and
I'll jump in, Joe, if you would like. Once again, Richard Rodriguez, National Policy
okay.
Director with One Fair Wage. I think what I heard in the question was how is current events affecting the work that we're doing? In essence,
and being
with
specific also about the work, your work.
yeah. So in lieu of ICE coming in with federal raids in Chicago land area, a lot of restaurant owners are hurting with that disruption, with the cost of living and material and goods, and all of that going up. Restaurants are hurting. Um, Currently, in Chicago, there was a bill that just was an ordinance that was just proposed yesterday, to pause the One Fair Wage ordinance. So next Wednesday in the city of Chicago, they're going to have a vote on pausing the victory that we had achieved 2 years ago, as uh, they'll get one more increase and then they're looking to cut it off. So how does the uh, world events affect the work that we're doing? They're using uh, potential restaurant closings because of the cost of living going up, because of rents going up for restaurant owners, and attributing that to the wage increases as the factor, one of the major factors why restaurants are closing, which is a false narrative. It's affecting us tremendously. So with fighting back, the national agenda from the Trump administration with the raids and impacting businesses, small businesses and small restaurant owners, and the workforce as well, we're seeing significant impact in the work that we're doing day to day.
Yeah.
I can just add, hi, Joe. I'm curious to just for folks who are here for the workshop. I'm just curious, how many folks have worked in the restaurant business? Like how many from back in the front of the house? Like, okay, so when we're talking about, and we sort of went through some of the, okay, so we know a lot and we've all eaten in restaurants, right? So like, I think one of like the core that maybe like as someone who has worked in the industry knows is how the model itself, like the structure itself is so flawed. So the tipped wage, just that power imbalance, you're sort of starting from that place and without any mechanisms in place within the workplace to actually like address customer behavior or a colleague or a supervisor. There's just like, and within the industry itself is so normalized. And I imagine if you worked in the industry and you said, okay, well, this place, I'm feeling like not protected, not seen. I'm working in the back in the kitchen and I'm just afraid that someone's going to walk by me and touch me inappropriately. I mean, these are the realities that our folks are confronting with daily. And I think one of the ways that we, that Richard, that Reagan, that our organizations and that FLOP try to really address that is by building solidarity among workers, sort of breaking down the divisions between workers, starting from a place of these are your rights. And as our social safety nets and as worker protections are weakened and underfunded, both federally and state, I mean, we're doing what we can in Illinois, but there's still real threats. And when that's so normalized, it becomes so hard to sort of imagine what thriving could look like in the hospitality industry. And I think that's what we try to do with workers is sort of start from that place that you go to work, and you deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, and to have your wages. So often we start with wage theft or experiences from workers if they're sharing sexual harassment or sexual abuse or favoritism or no sort of say in their scheduling. These are all real issues that I think every worker is experiencing, but then is sort of profoundly deep, I guess, for lack of a better word, for restaurant workers specifically, because as I said, so normalized that like you go from one job to another and it's very similar. And so what we're trying to do is sort of shake up that system and start identifying ways that workers can really like feel good about their work within the industry. So it's not super specific, but I think like the general sort of ominous threats and the existential threats that everyone's feeling right now are felt very profoundly in an industry that like is there to serve and make people feel whole and full and happy. So I don't know, Reagan or Richard, if you want to, if I capture that, okay. Sorry, I'm getting cut off a little bit, so I apologies too. I'm gonna.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
And I'm back. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So welcome back, Alexandra, and I'm passing it on to you.
Thank you. So my name is Alexandra Sosa. I'm the Chief Executive Officer with the Farm Worker and Landscape Advocacy Project. I apologize for the technology issues. And our mission of the organization is to improve working conditions and opportunity for low-wage workers. One of the industries that we focus on are restaurant workers because they are so critical and fundamental to our lives, our day-to-day lives, and they work in restaurants. And the situation that we are reading right now is the reason because we are doing this panel, and we wanted to talk about the labor behind the meal and organizing for rights and policy reforms for restaurant workers. And one of the issues that wakes me up every day thinking like, what is behind our food? And that's why I want to ask our fabulous panelists that are with us today. I'm going to start with Richard and then Regan and then Joel. What are the challenges that you are currently facing in what are the challenges that you see that currently are facing hospitality workers, not only locally but at the national level? And from immigration policies to the debate over the one fair wage ordinance, what impact have you seen policy have on those low wage workers and the community they are coming from? If you want to go ahead and answer. Richard, Joel, Regan?
Or do you want to start us off?
Yes, please start, Richard, yes.
So I think what I heard, once again, the question was like, what are some of the challenges that we're facing? Is that correct?
Yeah, what are the
Some of the
challenges
immediate
that the
challenges.
workers are facing?
Yeah, so some of the immediate challenges that we see are workers that are afraid to go to work because of the ICE raids. Things have started to come back a little bit, but we've seen a significant impact in the restaurant industry, with some restaurants having to close down, their doors because of the financial hit during the Midway Blitz, that you can call it, the ICE raid that we had here in Chicago. And during that time, we've seen aldermen, pushing that the restaurant closures are due to the wage increases that the workers have been receiving over the last couple of years. Currently, restaurant workers, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, it's $12.60 that they're making per hour, which is above the state minimum, sub-minimum wage in Illinois, and it's supposed to continuously rise. So they've been getting a wage increase over the last couple of years. And currently, the bill that was just introduced yesterday is to freeze those wages. And their main reasoning behind it is they're going to be suggesting that restaurants are closing their doors because they can't afford the wage increases. So as the affordability crisis that we're all facing, right, where the cost of goods, material, rent, and everything is going up, their restaurants are also feeling the effect of the Trump tariffs. Those are real. They're also seeing those gas price increases as well, electric bill increases, just as much as workers are. So they're using all of those external factors as a way to suggest that workers don't deserve wage increases. And they're saying that they're going to balance the national agenda on the backs of workers. They're saying that workers are the ones that should have to pay the price and cut back on their wages because they can't afford, the cost of utilities and bills and, the external factors as well. So those are some of the big immediate things that we're facing, currently today. Joe, you might have got the email that I sent out this morning. I don't know. But you'll be getting the email, but they introduced that ordinance yesterday. So we're going to have to mobilize, workers quickly on an 8:30, Wednesday morning for a city council meeting to let aldermen know that, no, you shouldn't be balancing these external factors on the backs of restaurant workers, because restaurant workers are also facing the same cost of living increases. They're seeing the cost of their utility bills go up. They're seeing the cost of rent going up. They're seeing the cost of groceries going up. And the average wage of a restaurant worker is not one in which, restaurant owners have the same balance there. So, those are some of the immediate things that we're facing on a day-to-day basis, with national implications that are affecting us here locally as well.
What about you, Joe? What do you see nationally, internationally? What are the challenges those workers are facing?
I think if we look at recently, this has been making a resurgence in the news, a problematic chef from Warlord Restaurant. And Reagan can also speak to it because they have workers as well that are engaged around that. But what I think is most problematic about that is like, again, this sort of narrative of like one bad chef with who and this chef was a terror. And there's been many reports of um individual chefs, and there's sort of like a hyperfixation. Thanks for sharing some of these pieces, and almost sort of a mystique and sexiness about like the horrible treatment and the normalization of like how this sort of behavior is treated. And I think like what we're missing when we focus on those one, sort of the individual bad chef is like the systems around them that make the way that they exploit power and abuse workers so normalized and so almost encouraged. And I think like we do, and we sort of think like, oh, what can we do about this? Like, this is such an insurmountable program. Like, but what we can do is identify, conduct an audit of sexual harassment, of policies and practices within the workplace, have clear mechanisms for reporting sexual harassment, for wage theft, for all of these pieces that are independent from a human resources, which is often focused on compliance for the company and not what workers really need and their like livelihoods and life, and safety. And so I would say that like we're at this like moment again in Chicago, and I think nationally, where we've cycled through another reckoning around a horrible chef. We've cycled through another reckoning of evil elites like Epstein. And what we really need to do now is say like, okay, enough of the reckonings. What are we going to do about it? And like push the industry here to like stop acting like this is just inevitable within the industry and to start proactively doing things about it, like proactive sexual harassment training, like audits, just a series of real pieces that like could protect workers and make them feel safer rather than the sort of individual focus. We can do both things. Bad chefs can have consequences, and the restaurant itself needs to really shift as well, and listen to workers and what they need and want. So I'd say like Epstein, like all this sort of national news and how it's impacting us and workers is that we care about them, and that there are ways that they can start to address these issues. Reagan, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I think you did a great job of summarizing that. I think it's we have a lot of power, not just as an industry, but I think as a food system. And one bad chef is the fault of everyone in the food system, is the fault of vendors, is the fault of liquor reps who continue to supply those chains. Yeah, we should care as much about environmental policies and where our food comes from as we do about the people whose hands bring it to us.
Thank you. For example, here at FLAP, we see how our restaurant workers have been deported, have been put in a deportation process. Some of them with work permits, some of them citizens, legal permanent residents, and of course, that is affecting the whole families. I can speak, for example, of a couple who were born in foreign countries, El Salvador and Guatemala, but they were brought here when they were like 4 years old, 5 years old, have a child now that is 1 year old, and now the child is put in a foster home, and then the workers are put in the deportation process and sent back to their home country when their home country is the United States for them, right? Like they don't speak the language in Guatemala and El Salvador, and they have lived here the whole life. But that is what we are facing right now. So FLAP provides resources like immigration services and employment law, attorney who try to advocate for those workers. We try to provide financial assistance, technical assistance, doing all your representations. I'm wondering if your organizations, and this time I'm going to start with Regan, if you don't mind, and then go with Richard and then Joe. What the resources are available to those communities that you see that they can use And also what tool or resources are available to workers and organizers that are available to fight those issues. Because, for example, with my team, the amount of drama, the amount of trauma that the team has to go through witnessing those deportations, witnessing those family separations is huge, to the point that this year, I think organizations should be focusing in their mental health and the well-being of the staff, for the staff to be able to be frontline workers and continue accomplishing our missions. So please tell me, Regan, or tell us what do you see, and then we'll go with Richard and then Joe.
Yeah, I heard your question, what like resources or tools are available to our communities fighting all of these injustices. Yeah, I mean the good news is there are a lot of resources available. I think right, times are scary, people are overwhelmed, they have an onslaught of crises that they're facing, but folks aren't alone. Even with like deportation, a number of folks are being deported because they don't know their rights and they sign their own deportation papers without first speaking to a lawyer and without first speaking to advocates. So a huge part of our work is just educating people on what are your rights, how to stand up for yourself, simple phrases to remember and to repeat. Um, Within my organization, we recently had a kidnapping of a close community member. And as organizers, we felt like we were prepared. We were not. So even just simple things like getting documents in order, understanding who in your community you can reach out to for support. Even simple things like calling a lawyer, what are the hotlines numbers, making sure you have people available to call them, doing translation labor. Like, we need to take this time very seriously and prepare as individuals, but then also prepare as community folks. I agree with you on the mental health for sure. I think restaurants, ownership and management can do a better job of creating more holistic and safe spaces that are uh, really considering and taking into account the wellness of their workers. We have seen some shifts in internal policies within restaurants of doing ice drills in their establishments, having more comprehensive wellness and mental health resources for workers, allowing people to take off or coordinating funds for people to take like taxis or Ubers to and from work if they're afraid. I think we need to start being creative about what tools and resources we have in our local communities that we can access. A huge resource that we use a lot with our folks is Southern Smoke Foundation. They have an emergency relief fund for restaurant and bar workers who are facing unexpected expenses, groceries, rent bills, medical bills. You can reach out to them and apply for emergency financial assistance if you are a hospitality worker. Thanks for dropping that in the chat. And then I'll pause and let Joe and Richard speak.
Richard?
I'll let Joe go over because I know she's got a great tool that that she'd like to probably share, and then I'll go last. Sorry, Joe.
Oh, no. Well, with the Chat Project and Work It, we created Shift Change, which is an anonymous bilingual reporting tool for workers in Chicago. So what happens is a worker shares their experience in their own words, and often this will, wage theft, sexual harassment, I mean, really a variety of reports and in their own words. And then an organizer sort of reaches out to them, does a one-on-one with them to identify what they need, what sort of supports, does some safety planning. So that's something that I think is really critical. And this is what Reagan is also alluding to, is like empowering workers to identify, okay, if you're not able to leave this job right now and you have to, what are the things that you need to do right now to feel safe? What does that look like? What can you do? Who do you contact? Sort of an emergent, just full on safety planning. But often workers will file a report on shift change, and we have this interactive map. We really think of it as like a public health tool that will show how your restaurant and other restaurants within your area, you can see other reports about sort of how systemic some of these issues are for workers. We just had a couple of reports this week around wage theft and around sexual harassment. And so what we try to do is meet workers where they're at, sort of really sense what are the supports you need, what are the resources you need. And often folks will identify, I want a lawyer, I want a lawyer, I want a lawyer. And while that's like the first thing that we often think of, what I want to encourage us to really think about is like the power of workers themselves. If in Little Village you have 10 restaurants and five of them, and workers from five of them are experiencing wage theft, that's an opportunity to gather those workers together and start identifying how we can claim those wages back. How do we organize for change? How do we build this? How do we support the business to get this done? You know, like all of these different pieces. I think as our sort of laws and policies are being weakened, we have to sort of rely on our own resilience within the community to organize and sort of start to address these things. But I think a big added value that Shift Change has is sort of a real look into the industry, public health perspective, how systemic some of these workplace violations are, placing that with, and then mobilizing and engaging like meaningfully with workers about how to get, how to like address their concerns at their workplace. Just trying to think if that, and I think just one other thing, sorry, but I think one other really cool thing about Shift Change is as enforcement around some of our amazing policies in Chicago, like earned sick days, one fair wage, which is, you know, being threatened because corporations are threatened by it, right? Is being able to sorry, I got cut off there for a second, but is being able to identify ways to enforce these policies that are like incredibly meaningful for workers, and getting a sense of where are they being enforced, where are they not being enforced, and what can we do collectively to start to improve the what those workplaces look like. Richard?
Thank you. Currently, we're developing an organizing tool, but our most recent launch is Just Safe Food. It's the counter to ServSafe, the food handling service license. So we've launched Just Safe Food in California, and we're looking at how we could implement this in Cook County as well. So if you're not familiar, and I know this might have been one of our topics that we were going to be covering in today's panel, I'm hopeful that I'm not jumping the gun, but Just Safe Food is a way for us to think about sustainability as an organization as well long-term, to make sure that we have the resources available to provide the deeper organizing and identifying, worker vulnerability and being able to provide, a service in a multitude of ways, developing membership out of it and building a large community nationwide of service workers. So this is our hope for the future, to be able to see digitally, how we're communicating with service workers across various different fronts. Because there's no sectoral organizing, right? We're looking at how can we look to organize sectorally to be able to apply, a national policy agenda that could, benefit the workers in the service industry. So one way in which that we're looking at doing it is through Just Safe Food and the food handling service license, by being able to also offer additional benefits and features to service workers in the future. So that's where we're moving with our technology, and we're super excited to hopefully be able to fight back the National Restaurant Association. I can't wait till we cover that part. Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think we have a part of the panel discussion around the food handling service license and the National Restaurant Association narrative. So I don't want to steal all the thunder there, but if I'm not mistaken, we do have that coming up too.
Thank you. So the theme of the Food Justice Summit is reclaiming food, land, and power. How do you understand this theme? And how does the work you and your organization are doing relate to this? Before you answer, I want to say that thinking about food and what is behind the food is so fundamental, and this is really, really a strong call for everyone to think when you are in a restaurant and when you are eating, who is behind that food? What exploitation is going on? What human labor trafficking is happening? What human sex trafficking is happening? Our farm workers are in the field growing the food that is later put in our table, and it's coming full of pesticides that eventually bring sickness to our families, Parkinson and other diseases, and our other illness. And our restaurant workers are also in touch with that food. And besides the exploitation and the health issues they are having, the family separations are also happening. So I want to know what is your perspective, or how do you see the theme of the Food Justice Summits, what that means for you, reclaiming food, land, and power. I don't know, Regan, you want to start, and then Richard and Joel?
Yeah, sure, happy to. I mean, as a restaurant worker, as a hospitality worker, there's so much power in food itself as a connector for people, as a form of sustenance, as a carrier of culture and history. And all of our work at the Chad Project is about helping and advocating for and working alongside workers as they reclaim their power. The industry is constantly telling restaurant workers, food workers that you are worthless, that you are powerless, that you have to do what we say and you have to tolerate the mistreatment. And that is absolutely false. So I see the reclaiming of power of our work is helping workers understand that they're powerful. They're powerful as individuals, and they're damn well powerful as an entire restaurant, an entire industry. And like as restaurant workers, they are the connecting tissue within our communities. We rely on restaurant and hospitality spaces to celebrate, to come together, to mourn, to grieve, to share culture and history, like I said. So I think it is past time that we actually hold the folks who make these spaces as powerful as folks worth our investment in time and folks worth our solidarity. And Richard, I'll pass it over to you.
I don't know if I had anything else to add. That was perfect. Thank you. I'll kick it over to Joe.
Yeah, it got me really excited. And it's like when we ask about what does hospitality really mean? And like, what does it mean to really reclaim hospitality? I think it's like all the things that Reagan just named. And I think like having Flap a part of this conversation and having Alexandra help facilitate this conversation is really important, because I think often we're seen as like, here's a restaurant, front and back of the house. It's very segmented. It's very siloed. And then you have the food, and then the trucks who transport the food. We want to acknowledge and like honor the entire food system of workers, the land, everything. And I think like we can do it. Like we tend to think like, okay, we can only do restaurants right now. We can't do the whole food system. That's way too big. But like we can do a lot of things all at once. I just think we have to have like analysis and like start to think and like connect and like hear really what are the priorities, what are workers saying, what are farm workers saying, what do they need, how does that link up with cooks, like, and what we see at our table. like those are the conversations that I think are so rich, and we need to continue having and like deepening and challenging ourselves to kind of get out of these silos too. And I know we use the word silo a lot within our world right now, but like truly um I was going to make a stupid analogy about food and your plate, and you know, we the best meals are those that are reflective of so many cultures and like everything, and that's what we have to do, I think, intentionally, is like really have force these conversations, challenge us to like think about what it looks like to build power for food workers. um like what does that look like, and how does that get us closer to what hospitality really could be, which is like at its best part what Reagan is describing. So. That's up for me.
Thank you. Before I pass to Rachel for questions and answers, she's going to moderate that part. I really want to thank everyone for joining us, and I really want to thank for the panelists. It's an honor to be with you. And a final thought is a friendly call to think about our restaurant workers, to think about the struggles they are facing every day, to think how when we pay the bill, $200 for a meal, that worker is probably getting $5 tip or not getting a tip at all. And it's very ironic that our workers who are putting the food on our table, sometimes they don't even have money to provide for food for their families. They are victims of sexual abuse, human labor trafficking, no payment for wages, illegal deductions for uniforms and tools they have to use at work. And those deductions are putting them below minimum wage. And this is the whole reason because my team and I are here in this panel, and it's because we want to create more conscience about what's going on around the workers that are putting the food on our table. Passing to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Alexandra. Before we start the Q&A, Richard, do you wanted to talk about the NRA? You mentioned that you want to talk about or expand about the NRA a bit, or?
I had thought that that was part of one of the panel discussions. I apologize, but I don't know if you guys are familiar with the National Restaurant Association and a lot of their activity since the beginning of the National Restaurant Association. It was actually founded in Chicago, and its main purpose was to suppress wages for recently freed Black slaves that were going into the workforce. So since their conception, it was an organization built on suppressing wages for workers. The Pullman porters were organizing, and they didn't want that for restaurant owners as well. So they started the National Restaurant Association. And when it came time to first create a federal minimum wage, the National Restaurant Association lobbied to create what is called the sub-minimum wage. We call the sub-minimum wage a federal sub-minimum wage for specifically restaurant workers. And they've been carving out specifically restaurant workers ever since, and have been the leading factor in why the federal minimum wage has not increased, since since I don't know the last time it was raised. I don't have the date off the top of my head, but they're the leading factor why wages are not increasing. They're constantly fighting back, and we quite literally see it in my world every day across the country. Quite literally, I got the call at 6 o'clock yesterday when they filed their ordinance to cut wages for restaurant workers in Chicago. So the National Restaurant Association is a bad organization, in our opinion, and we're hopeful that we can combat some of the evil work that they're doing across the country with Just Safe Food, and creating a counter, to what they do. I'll lean a little bit more in. There was a New York Times expose on the lobbying dollars used from ServSafe. They're literally using the money from restaurant workers from that. That's how the National Restaurant Association exists. A majority of their money comes from Just ServSafe. It does not come from the multinational corporations contributing to the National Restaurant Association. A majority of their money comes from the food handling service license. So what they do is they take that money and then use it to lobby and fight back, workers and wage justice issues. So I just wanted to make sure you guys were all aware of that.
Thank you for, does anyone have anything to add to that? Okay. So now I would like to open the floor for questions. Um, so what I saw in the chat is someone wanted to know more about Chad's open town hall meetings. So Reagan, go ahead.
Yeah, of course. Since last year, October and last year, our industry experienced a abduction by immigration enforcement. A restaurant worker was taken directly outside of his workplace in the back alley while heading to work. And this is a cook who'd been in our community for well over a decade, who'd worked in his community for well over a decade. And so as a response, we called an emergency town hall in the neighborhood where this abduction happened to bring together the restaurant community to start brainstorming on what we could do to prevent this from ever happening again. We received a real influx of people who not only wanted to hear the solutions, but just wanted to engage and do something. Over 50 people showed up to this town hall to collaborate on what restaurants could do for ICE. And what came from that was we saw a desire for our industry for more of these. So we hosted one this past February in the West Loop, bringing together Chicago bar workers and owners and managers in the West Loop area. We're working with Illinois Restaurant Workers Association, IWA, to produce one on the South Side. That will be, I believe, April 20th. And we are collaborating with local community members, both restaurant workers and like mutual aid groups on the North Side, to do one over in the Argyle area, and then to do one like in kind of uptown Lincoln Park area. So we're looking to hyper localize that restaurant community to be responsive and prepared for the increased immigration enforcement that is likely going to be coming with our warmer weather. So if you are interested, please reach out. You can either email us at team@thechadproject.org or DM us on Instagram. It's Chad Project on Instagram. If you're looking for our dates for our next town hall, we would love to have people a part of the conversation. It's very collaborative.
One other, I can just add to, we're Survivors Know and Yo Soy Ella. We're holding Rooted and Ready. I put the registration link in the chat as well. It's going to be a really both fun and strategic event where it's going to be at Blue Door in Little Village, and we'll have mental health support. We have curbside compassion, everything Spanish and English. We're Ask an Organizer, family preparedness. We're doing some work with Illinois Workers in Action. They're amazing on family preparedness. Really trying to this event is like a sort of gratitude for all of the work that we've been all collectively holding with attacks to everything. So prepare and build and be in community with one another. So we'll also have Moño braids, also free books and screen print. It's going to be think of it as like a depot for your heart and your head and your feet to kind of nourish you. And as we sort of prepare for the next phase of attacks to working people, to anyone of color, to immigrants, everything. And I think, yeah, so that's March 21st, 10 to 2. And also holding some additional events too coming up as well. Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning that. Does anyone else have any questions? And if you do, please put your questions in the chat.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna post my question in the chat. It's a mobilized link. If anybody can join us next Wednesday to fight back the aldermen that are requesting to cut wages, we need as many people as possible to fill up the chamber. Please share the link. I have another one for the sign-on letter that I posted earlier. We desperately need as many people to show up as possible. I know they do these at the earliest of times and in the middle of the week, which makes it so difficult for people from our community to be able to show up. But we have resources to help if people need travel arrangements to be able to get from the north side down to or from the south side to get in. You know, if you're in the Chicagoland area and you can join us, we're in need. It's not looking good. They're fighting back pretty hard. So if you can join us, we'd greatly appreciate it.
And Richard, can we just say like two things about that? Because like you talked about the National Restaurant Association, but like break that down a little bit. So in Chicago, I think like we have a lot of restaurant groups. Everyone knows Lettuce Entertain You, right? Like RJ Grunt, like it's they have about 120 restaurants in Chicago and Illinois. And that, but so many of the restaurants appear to be standalone spots where folks can dine. But they've been a huge force. This is a multi-million-dollar corporation, huge force against workers, asserting to move away from tipped wages, right? So they've been a huge force at the Illinois Restaurant Association. And why do they want to, why are they so strongly opposed to elimination of the tipped wage, right? And why are they investing so many resources into preventing worker sort of rights rather than putting into place structural changes that could actually improve what it looks like to work in a restaurant? I don't know.
Yeah, they exist to help restaurants make as much money as possible. Bottom line, full stop. That's why they exist. They're there to help their members profit off of the two-tier wage system. So keeping sub-minimum wages intact essentially ultimately helps the bottom line of the restaurant, the owners that are part of the National Restaurant Association. I'll add just a little background too. There are 7 states that have already eliminated the sub-minimum wage. 7 states that have eliminated for decades. If you've ever traveled to Minneapolis, if you ever have gone to Nevada, or California, Washington, Seattle, if you've ever traveled right to various different states, there's 7 states that have already eliminated the sub-minimum wage. So it is possible to have restaurants exist and flourish and be successful paying the full minimum wage, a solid base wage with tips on top. They're going to try to fill up the chamber, protect our tips. They're going to suggest that tips have gone down in the city of Chicago. They're going to suggest that restaurants are closing because of those wage increases. So that's what we'll be facing next Wednesday morning when they propose their ordinance and vote on the ordinance to cut wages for tipped workers. So thank you for pointing that out. For as far as like tipped wages, I also add when I'm talking to legislators, have you ever traveled to Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, any of the, red states where they're receiving $2.45 of minimum wage or $4.25, sub minimum wage. Your tipping typically does not change. You're tipping 18%, 20% traditionally across the board, wherever you are. You never really ask your server, how much are you making? Let me calculate that to help you make a little bit more. When you go to California, you tip 20%, 18%. You don't not tip them because they're making the minimum wage. And no state has ever rolled back their going backwards. None of them that are making the full minimum wage have gone back to saying, hey, we need to bring back sub minimum wages. So, fighting that national narrative has been a difficult part because they do have so much money and constantly are able to out organize us on the ground because they just have a boatload of dollars to be able to spend. So since we've enacted one fair wage in the city of Chicago, they have been constantly organizing and mobilizing restaurant owners to be prepared to roll it back. So we'll see the Lettuce Entertain Yous. We'll see Sam Toya there next Wednesday, and he'll have 4 or 5 restaurants that'll be able to shut down and bring all of their workers, and they'll bring their shirts. They'll have yellow shirts on. They'll say "Save our tips." And what they're going to suggest is that their tips have gone down. They're going to suggest that they're closing down restaurants because of those increases. And the workers that are showing up, the owners are telling them that you're going to lose your job. We're going to have to shut down. We won't be able to exist if we have to do this next wage increase. So if you want to save your job, put on this shirt, come on down to City Hall and advocate against your own interest. And they're able to successfully do that because of that power dynamics that Joe had talked about earlier. The power dynamics of being able to tell them you need to do this or else you're going to lose your job. When your sole livelihood is revolved around making that income, you sometimes go against your own best interest. So thank you, Joe, for pointing that out.
Thank you, Joe, for pointing that out. Yeah, thank you, everyone. So I just want to ask the audience, do you have any more questions or do you have questions? Or does the speakers have questions for the other members? Oh,
Oh,
oh. So, from this conversation, how can the audience support your work and support restaurant workers or food workers? And I want if everyone could answer that, including Alexandra. So, um, I'll throw it to Reagan. Go ahead.
Um, you could definitely follow us online, Chad Project, on Instagram. But I would say more holistically, I would listen to workers, support workers. They know what they need in their restaurants. There's more than enough top-down information that comes from bosses and policymakers. Get collaborative, care what workers say. Uh, Pay attention to where your dollar goes. Get curious is what I would say.
Joe.
yeah, I think that and like if follow, I think all of the things that Reagan just said, and I think, also if a family member or yourself or a friend or and they're experiencing, if they feel like they're being exploited at work, support them, identify, like work with them on ways that they can feel safe, like listen to them, and encourage them and know that like it doesn't have to be this way, that collectively there's a lot more restaurant workers than there are restaurant owners, and we can and we can definitely change this industry. And there's a lot more eaters as there are like not eaters too. So like like Reagan said, I think we have to follow our values and like challenge the industry to do better. And part of that is like listening to workers, leaning to them, and then also supporting big policy fights, accountability fights, chiming in when there's exposures of bad chefs and saying, hey, it's the system, it's not just one guy or one gal, so, and challenging investors to invest in workers instead of, flawed models that exploit workers. So, all of those things are good starts. Richard? And showing up on Wednesday, I guess, Richard, is that what you were going to say? He's like, one more plug.
Yeah. Thank you all for attending the Organizing for Your Rights and Policy Reform for Restaurant Workers. You can follow us at onefairwage.org. I dropped my email in there. Love your servers, right? They work hard. They look like us. They are us. Appreciate you guys spending the time here to listen a little bit about the work that we're doing, and appreciate as much as possible, truly, if you're in the Chicagoland area, if you could take the day off of work, and if you can come join us that morning, it will make a significant difference in restaurant workers' lives moving forward. It is part of a broader fight. They're also moving legislation to change laws in Springfield to fight back what we were able to do in Chicago. We're currently also pushing a bill to fight for livable wage, $27 an hour, with increases tied to the cost of inflation, and eliminating all subminimum wages for all workers, nobody left out. That's formerly incarcerated workers, that's youth workers, that's restaurant workers. They're looking, if they're successful in rolling back and cutting wages in Chicago, it will put fear in other legislators, and they'll use that to fight back, not just cutting wages for restaurant workers, but raising wages for all workers. Like I had pointed out before, the National Restaurant Association is the culprit in fighting back all wages. So this fight should be everyone's fight in the fight for wage justice. And of course, wage justice is racial justice, is fighting for better health care, better resources for yourself and your family. So thank you all for taking the time to be with us here today. It was a pleasure and an honor to be with you all.
And Alexandra. Oh, your microphone.
I want to second everything that has been said, and also to highlight again that there is a labor behind the meal, and workers have human rights and also legal rights. So please share our contact information with those workers and tell them that they have rights and they can stand up. FLAP and other organizations are there to support those workers.
Thank you, everyone, for coming today.